What's the good word, y'all? DKB here. So today I want to revisit the trade request that were put in by Moore and Denzel Mims and determine if we should try to trade one or both of these guys or simply keep both of these talented individuals on the roster and give our new offensive coordinator, Nathaniel Hackett, the best opportunity to go out there and try to put a great product out on the field for us. Now, there's still some exciting additions that can even further improve these two players as well in terms of our wide receiver coach position that's still open. And the two names that we interviewed out there were Seth Ryan and Zach Azzanni from the Lions and the Broncos, respectively. And both of those units looked like top tier units in the NFL this season, regardless of the record that they had. Now, diving into the whole Elijah Moore situation and kind of what happened there. Quick context. After the Green Bay Packers win at Lambeau Field, huge W for us at that point in our season, Elijah Moore tweeted out some things essentially saying that he's unhappy, he has his truth that he needs to tell, and different things of that nature. And it was just very bad timing, a very poor situation, especially after a win and what should have been a huge highlight of a season that led us to the playoffs. But it happened, and from then on out until the last, handful of weeks in the season, Elijah Moore's continued to post cryptic tweets. He officially had put in a trade request, and then we had all of the drama between him and Mike LaFleur, and it seems like we've gotten some more pieces to that situation, although we still haven't fully heard from Elijah Moore. And at this point, I really wouldn't want to. I don't like, dwelling on things that no longer matter with Mike LaFleur being on a new team. But essentially the I guess result of that was that we found out most recently the blow up that happened in practice between Elijah Moore and Mike LaFleur was that at some point practice got stopped. Elijah Moore started yelling that, LaFleur sucks, telling him to go F himself. And that's when Robert Saleh intervened and decided that was a good time for him to go home, hence the trade request and everything else since then. But ultimately, Elijah Moore, he was painted as the bad guy. That may not have fully have been the case. He did, advise us that basically he wants to be involved in the offense, win, lose, or draw. And he felt like that wasn't happening. And I think that's where this conversation starts. This was a huge piece of it. Now, his rookie season was phenomenal for the amount of games that he was able to play. We talked about that 4 or 5 stretch week of games where he was leading or at the top of most wide receiver statistics, and he was on a very poor roster. Rookie Zach Wilson, plenty of injuries to guys, barely got to play with Braxton Berrios, which would have been the next best option on our roster with Corey Davis going down. And so it was really Elijah Moore and a bunch of, jag guys, as Gunny would call them. And so you get excited after his rookie season heading into his sophomore year, and things go absolutely awry. Mike LaFleur, things were not great, to put it lightly, right? And I don't think Mike LaFleur was the only cause of this. I don't think he's necessarily a bad offensive coordinator. I just think he wanted to fit a lot of square objects through a round hole, and he wasn't playing towards the strength of our team, to put it simply. That would probably be the focal point. So we look at Elijah Moore. The biggest negative that I think I heard a lot of people mention was, why is he playing on the outside? When we look back at his rookie season, he played quite a bit on the outside as well, and you've seen a lot of his success. Now, honestly, that 4 or 5 week stretch of games where he was near the top of the NFL, he was playing mostly on the outside. He needed to, with Braxton Berrios and other individuals filling in as the slot to try to help give a hot check down option. But he's shown that he can have success on the outside. The biggest issue was his utilization. I think this is ultimately what everything comes down to: the blow up, the lack of statistical production that we've seen, all of those things. There's an article that was put out probably 4 or 5 weeks into the season that dove into why we're seeing Elijah Moore look like an absolute ghost on the field, even though he's getting open on a wide variety of his routes. And then there was a point, and I'm not sure where he finished on the season with this, but he had the most amount of yards run with the minimum amount of targets. It's crazy to absolutely think how ineffective he was in this offense simply because they couldn't get the ball to him. Manufactured touches, route combinations being used, etc. But that's where I fall on him. He was utilized in a very poor manner, and I think you see that across the stats that were put up for him. I mean, he was able to play 5 more games. Even with the behavioral benching Robert Saleh gave him, he literally did worse in every area. Targets, catches, yards per receptions, touchdowns. The only thing that slightly improved was his catch rate, and even in terms of getting him involved in the run game, we seen that last year he had 5 rushes for 54 yards. He even found the end zone. This year he had 5 yards on 5 touches. So, I mean, to put things in perspective, LaFleur just couldn't find a way to get him involved in this offense in an effective manner. And even when they were trying to do things like put him in the slot, it just seemed like LaFleur struggled to put him in great situations for himself, which shouldn't be hard to do with the skill set that Elijah Moore brings, being an inside and an outside wide receiver. And even though we had a better team overall, it just felt like they were able to beat up on us, too easily. Now, with Elijah Moore, we have the discipline issues. We have the LaFleur utilization concerns. We have the stats that were worse across the board. And I think the biggest thing that speaks to this is none other than, the amount of plays he was able to go out there and get. We've seen that he was involved for 476 snaps last year. He actually got 731 this season, and we still have the much worse output. So that lets you know where we're sitting at with him. There are some bright spots, though, and the biggest one is Nathaniel Hackett, in my opinion. From the NFL insiders I talked to, the best thing they love about Nathaniel Hackett is that he's personable. He's able to go out there, really connect with his players and get the most out of it. But what struck me as intriguing is that it was mentioned he does one of the best jobs of putting his wide receivers in positions to be able to make plays. And this is spoken no better than the statistic that was out there for the Denver Broncos, and that the wide receiver group for them led the league in 3+ yards of separation. And of course, we know now, Russell Wilson just wasn't able to capitalize on a lot of those, among plenty of other struggles for that Denver Broncos offense. But clearly, Nathaniel Hackett knows what he's doing. And as I mentioned, we're also taking a look at their wide receiver coach potentially to come into this team as well. And I couldn't be more excited, whether it's him or Seth Ryan. But obviously, there's going to be a great overlap of talent there. So realistically, to me, I would keep Elijah Moore. I think he's a talent that can't be denied. He just didn't connect well with what Mike LaFleur was being asked of this team. And you can say that for a lot of the components. We even had questions in the tight end room. There were even questions about how we were utilizing our running backs before Breece Hall decided, I'm a transcendent talent and it doesn't matter. I can't be held back. So I would keep Elijah Moore. I don't think there's going to be huge concerns there, even when we did start trying to incorporate him more in the offense towards the end of the season. We got a lot of the comments about him bouncing back and becoming more of the kind of jovial, explosive guy and, locker room teammate that everybody loves, etc. Now, for Denzel Mims, his situation is much different. It's still a question of utilization, but we realized there was some things in the mental part that may not all necessarily work in his favor. The West Coast scheme is a very complex one. We did have that bit that Mike LaFleur also touched on, which, sent us rabid, in that he wants his players in the wide receiver room to know the X, Y, and Z spots in order to be able to see the field. And Denzel Mims seemed like he was struggling at just his one Z spot, let alone trying to figure out the slot and the X roll and all of these things. So this is where we get back to that square object round hole situation, because as an offensive coordinator, you want to be able to run the offense the way you're expecting to, but ultimately, if the talent doesn't allow it, you should be putting them in the positions they're best able to go out there and produce on the field, because that's what practice is for. Figure out a way to get them to improve in those areas in practice. And so For one, it seems like he had a very hard time picking up this playbook. You could probably say the same for Zach Wilson, to be honest. And granted, there was more struggles than just maybe him understanding the playbook. We're talking mechanics and things of that nature. But we could see that maybe there was more issues than this just being Denzel Mims' problem. But the other piece is the confidence. He felt like he couldn't do anything after what we've seen for his 5-week tryout his sophomore year, which would have been the first year in LaFleur's system. And we've seen absolutely atrocious play. Terrible routes run, absolutely incorrect routes run, drops on open catches. He couldn't do any of the things that he necessarily generally does. And so if we're betting on Denzel Mims to stay on this roster and have a breakout season, it's really still from an athletic standpoint. It almost feels like he's still on his rookie season, and we're hoping to see what he can do coming out of a college because he hasn't been able to produce much. He actually, statistically, still hasn't outpaced what Elijah Moore has done, and Denzel Mims has played 3 more games, although they've started about the same with Corey Davis being out this season. And so even with this season, a lot of people feel like he's shown and piecing things together. That may be the case, but I think we have to take it with a grain of salt. What Denzel Mims has truly shown us is that he's expanded what he can do in an offense. He was able to adequately go out there and replace Corey Davis to an extent. We didn't see the huge catches. We did see some clutch catches, though, which is what he should be known for. We did still see his ability to move chains, be able to go out there and break tackles, and then we've seen him be able to go out there and produce in the running game as well, with some very huge key blocks. One of those being the Denver Broncos one that sprung the only touchdown we got from Breece Hall. So we've seen that expand in his game. So what would make us want to keep Denzel Mims around? One of the best stats for him, not only is going to be his broken tackles, but he does average a healthy 16.1 yards per reception. So when he goes out there, he makes things happen. But the one that sticks out to me the most is that he's a chain mover. He only has 42 career receptions, but 27 of those have gone for first downs, which means on average, he's converting 63% of his catches for first downs. And that's usually via him dragging 3 or 4 people with him. So I love the mentality. I love the athleticism. Keep in mind, he compares to a Julio Jones. You can't teach any of that. Speed, size, he has the hands. I do think a lot of it is from the mental side of things, but I would say that he's turned a corner in that area a little bit. And again, with Nathaniel Hackett and a new wide receiver coach coming in, ideally from the Lions or the Broncos, I do think we could see a huge improvement in performance from him, especially considering we're not changing playbooks once again completely. Nathaniel Hackett may be able to simplify a lot of things, and I think he will utilize him in a much better manner. But if I had to, force my hand, I would say Denzel Mims is the likely trade option. I do think there's an offense out there where he can break out in relatively quick with the skill set that he brings. I would hope it's with us, though. So I would definitely want to keep both of them. I will say I think it largely depends on what we want to do with Corey Davis, especially since that more so directly impacts Denzel Mims as his direct replacement. We can go the cheaper route. Hope Denzel Mims breaks out. He doesn't need a 1,000-yard season. But I do think that he could be a big play threat and somebody that consistently moves the chains for us. Elijah Moore should be able to break out. But I would say if we can get like a 4th-round pick for Denzel Mims, we probably make that move in addition to still trading cutting a Corey Davis. And then we try to go a cheaper route and reset. But I would keep both of them, ideally, and I'll ride with the youth and the talent that we have and hope that a more senior coaching staff can bring it out. But let me know what your guys' thoughts are. Who would you trade, one or both, or what are your reasons for keeping them? And I'll catch you guys again. Peace.